We've officially made it to triple digits. Today, on a very special episode of Create and Consume podcast, I am reflecting on my journey to 100 episodes, which, yes, this one that you're listening to is the 100th episode of the podcast. And I'm wearing a fun top for the occasion if you're watching on YouTube. This is a milestone that sounded so far away, so far away, when I sat down at the mic for the very first time back in May of 2024. In this episode, I want to pull back the curtain and share even more about the how of how the podcast gets made every single week, and talk about what recording 100 episodes taught me about building a new brand and also growing a community. From the 10-hour-a-week schedule I use to keep me on track and sane with recording the podcast, to all of the different tools and scheduling automations and things that I use to keep the show running and consistent, I'm excited to tell you more about what it's really like to be a podcaster in 2026. I will also reveal the top 5 episodes of the podcast on both YouTube and Spotify. I'm going to share some underrated episodes of the podcast that maybe you missed depending on at what point you started listening. And I'll also talk a little bit about the future of the podcast and why I'll be prioritizing consistency over burnout for the next 100 episodes. Before we get into all things celebratory, let's do a little create and consume. And if you're new to the podcast, if you're jumping in at episode 100, first of all, hi, thank you for being here. I'm Austen, I'm a digital content creator. And one of the reasons I really wanted to start this podcast was because in the era of digital content, in the world that we live in, we are all creating and consuming every single week, whether it's as simple as, taking a couple of pictures of your baby with your iPhone, to making a cocktail, or, doing watercolors, or just creating something. You are always doing both, I find. So that's why I also do the little create and consume segment at the top of each episode, where I share what I am creating and consuming this week. And you guys can also let me know what you are creating and consuming too. Partly because I'm nosy, and also because I'm always looking for new things to consume, to create. I want to hear about whether you guys are journaling or doing needlepoint, or whether you just listened to a great podcast episode or tried a new recipe from a Substack that you follow. Tell us everything. No gatekeeping here. So please do. If you are listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment on this episode and let us know what you're creating and consuming in celebration of the 100th episode. As far as what I have been creating this week, I actually just posted a new partnership over on my Instagram, which I am really excited about. So earlier this year, I joined the Macy's Style Crew, and this is my first social media partnership that I'm officially sharing on my Instagram with them. So I did a little reel showcasing the new Elizabeth Arden fragrance. It's called Eternal Aura. Leighton Meester is the face of it, obviously very chic. And I have a tough time with floral fragrances, but I will say there's something about this scent that truly, to me, smells the way that I thought I would smell as like a 30-year-old living life in the city. So I am so happy that I loved this fragrance. And for the little reel that I created, I did this trend that you may have seen on Instagram or TikTok before, where you take one of the little coffee trays that can hold like 4 cups of coffee, and you put in like your coffee. I also threw in some hair accessories, a pair of sunglasses, and the fragrance. And I actually went and shot this at the Central Park Conservatory Garden. And I feel like this is one of New York City's hidden gems. It is free to visit. It's within like a little gated area of the park over on East 106th Street is where you can enter. So beautiful. And they were planting so many things for spring. I bet by the time you guys are listening to this episode, everything is fully planted and in bloom. So it would honestly be a perfect time for a visit. And I'm just so happy to be working with Macy's for this year and to have the opportunity to also work with brands like Elizabeth Arden through Macy's. It's such a cool concept and partnership that Macy's has with their style crew. So I will leave a link to my reel in the show notes if you want to go check it out. Obviously, any engagement, if you feel compelled to comment or save or share or whatever, or if you even feel compelled to recreate this trend yourself. I definitely did not invent this. I've seen it on Instagram and TikTok plenty. It's such a fun little video idea to showcase some of your favorite products. And then as far as what I had been consuming in the last week, I finished an audiobook, and this was my second ever audiobook that I listened to. It was Be Ready When the Luck Happens by Ina Garten. So this is her memoir, The Barefoot Contessa, as you may know her. And I love listening to a memoir on audiobook. I did this last year with Kelly Bishop's memoir, The Third Gilmore Girl, and I absolutely loved it. I love hearing the stories straight from the source and hearing like all of the nuance in their voice and hearing just their reactions and emotions really unfold as they're narrating the story. I just think it's such a fun way to consume a memoir specifically. And I learned so much about Ina and her life. She is such an impressive lady. She didn't have the best childhood. She actually worked at the White House before she bought Barefoot Contessa, which was a specialty food store in West Hampton. And she kind of just needed a career pivot, did a total 180 and went over, bought the store. She and Jeffrey were like dating all through college. They got married young. They talk about their relationship, or I guess she talks about their relationship quite a lot throughout the book. It really is just a great, great story. Like, I loved this book across the board. I would definitely recommend it. So be sure to let me know, like I said, what you guys are creating and consuming as well. Also, for book recommendations, if you guys want, you can follow me on Goodreads, but I am going to try to be better about sharing other little updates. I try to post what books I'm reading on Instagram stories. I also might start doing some quarterly book recaps. I actually did film one, so maybe that'll be out by the time this episode comes out. If it is, I will link it in the show notes. And of course, for the last 2 years, I've been doing my end of year reading recaps on YouTube as well. So if you guys want to chat books, come visit any of those places and do that with me. Okay, let's get into the 100th episode. And I, for this episode, went back and listened to episode 1 of the podcast. And I did pull a little clip to play for you guys here, just so we can appreciate how far the show has come. And I am very proud of myself from day 1 of this podcast. It has always been both in audio and video format. So I'm grateful that I can like look back, literally look with my eyes back on episode 1 that I posted on YouTube and see what we were working with. So let me roll a little audio for you from episode 1 so we can all appreciate what a journey this has been over the last almost 2 years. Why am I starting a podcast? Why now in 2024, after almost 12 years of creating content, did I say, hey, I should like pick up a microphone and try this whole other form of content creation that, I mean, technically I've never even done before. So the biggest reason is that I, in the last, I would say 3 to 4 years especially, have become like a podcast fiend. I love listening to podcasts. It is the thing that now gets more recommended to me on Spotify over music, unless it's anything Taylor Swift, that's kind of a given, but I just love podcasts. I love listening to them when I'm working, when I'm walking, when I'm cleaning. For some reason, it just is so comforting to have a familiar voice just hang out and be alongside you during the day. But in the last few years, I've really just become sucked into podcast culture. Like, I just love listening to them. There are so many where when the episode comes out, I feel like I'm probably one of the first to listen. I've bought podcast merch. I am just all in as a fan of this type of content. I really appreciated hearing myself talk about why I really wanted to start a podcast and what podcasts mean to me. And truly, at the end of the day, podcasts keep me company. And I spend a lot of time alone. Obviously, I'm self-employed. I build this business by myself. And I just really find comfort in hearing people talk about topics that I'm interested in, whether it's Gilmore Girls or reality television or fashion or beauty or any number of things. I just really love consuming podcasts, especially in an audio format. And I know that a lot of you feel the same way. And hopefully I have been able to keep you company, whether you're having the best day or a kind of weird day, or maybe just a day where you want to kind of process things on your own, but you still want to feel like someone is kind of going along with you, kind of floating through life alongside you. And I hope that the podcast has been that for some of you guys. It is crazy also just watching back that clip because obviously things looked pretty different. I mean, I was in a different apartment, mind you, like only a 10-minute walk from where I am right now. And I had my little video game microphone. I didn't really realize it was a video game microphone when I first bought it. I was just so excited that it was pink, but it has I think they call it like the RVG or RBG, like red, blue, green color rotation on the bottom, which I always thought was fun. But maybe was slightly visually not the best. I don't know. Whatever the case was, I was just so excited to like have a microphone, try my recording setup. My first couple of recordings did not go super smoothly. Now I've got a whole flow and setup of everything. I've got this gorgeous like brown chair that I get to sit in. If you're watching on YouTube, I have a microphone that now allows me to have more like free range, like have more of my outfits on camera, not just sitting at my desk. And I feel like we've definitely elevated the vibes around here. And I am obviously grateful for what everything looks like now, but I feel like the podcast is also such a great example of like just start. Like I always say, you can't edit nothing. So, how would I have known to get to this point had I not gone through a bunch of episodes, created things in the first place, and then thought, eventually it might be nice to get one of those like mic arms that I can be a little bit more hands free with so that I can move away from the desk. Or, oh, it might be nice to like have a designated spot where I just record the podcast from. And that way things can look consistent and nice and whatever. And here we are with all of those little things that I noticed over time that have actually turned into a reality. And even if you've been watching the podcast on YouTube for the last few weeks, you've probably even noticed little things change here and there. Like I got the mic cord is now a little bit more like not just wrapped around the mic, it actually looks nice. Got a new side table. I did a vlog on my YouTube channel where I went shopping for stuff for the home office and found that one in Home Goods. It's just been really fun to see the evolution of that. But I do feel like the core of the show, like the whole idea behind Create and Consume, has been the same throughout. And I'm so grateful to have had that kind of vision and that kind of brand ethos already established in my mind, and to be able to carry that throughout 100 episodes. Like, I am truly just proud. It's something that I'm really, really happy about. And none of this would be possible without you guys listening. And I pulled some stats from Spotify. My podcast has been streamed in more than 60 countries. That is so crazy. More than 50% of you guys are aged 28 through 34. So hello to all my millennial friends who joined me for this show. 90% of you are women. I did envision this podcast when I started it as being a space for the girls. And if you're a guy here too, or anybody else who's listening, thank you guys for being here as well. And I'm so happy to have all of you guys. So truly, truly, like every time you stream the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on audio, if you've ever shared an episode with a friend, just truly, truly, truly thank you so much. And I know this is mentioned at the end of every episode, but I figured while I have you guys here, while we're celebrating such an exciting milestone, I would put a reminder a little earlier in the episode that if you guys enjoy the podcast, one of the best things you can do is rate and review on Apple, truly. Those ratings and reviews mean so much. They really help people understand what the show's about, why you like the show. And it's just so nice and heartwarming when I get to read a review from someone who's like actually listening to me talk right now. It's really crazy to think about. So that is one of the best things you can do. Also, just subscribing to the YouTube channel, turning on notifications so you don't miss an episode. All of those are like really free, easy ways to support the show and will take truly like less than 2 minutes. So if you've already done any of those things, that means the world to me. And if you have a minute or two today, I would appreciate it, like actually more than you know. You guys know that I love to bring you behind the scenes of what it's actually like to put something together, especially on the content creation front. So I thought I would quickly walk you guys through what a typical like week in the life of a podcaster looks like for me. So I would say that in an ideal world, this is how my schedule shakes out. Monday is typically an outlining day, and what I try to do, like I said, this is in my ideal world. This is not always actually the case because of reality, but in my ideal world, what I like to do is on Mondays finish outlining 2 episodes of the podcast. And I have a whole little podcasting hub on Notion. And basically, I have a list of ideas and then I have my actual recording schedule. So I will go through my list of ideas, pick my 2 topics for the week, and then actually go like write those outlines and flesh them out. I start with a bunch of bullet points, obviously my own ideas, things that I want to talk about, any specific references. And then typically what I'll do is feed the outlines through like ChatGPT or Gemini. I actually use Gemini for this episode and the last episode. And I really liked the suggestions that it gave me. So if you guys listened to the cooking episode, it gave me the idea to add in a little section about like the mental load of grocery shopping, and especially talk about like what a struggle grocery shopping is in when you live in a city. Because I was telling Gemini, like my audience for the podcast, obviously I just read you some of the analytics, and if you're listening and fall into this category, then good for me for having confirmation of that. A lot of my audience is millennial women who live in and around major US cities specifically. So I feel like telling Gemini that and then getting that type of feedback and suggestion of something to add to my outline, I was like, oh yeah, like my audience would totally understand and empathize with that. So that was in addition to all the other stuff that I had already put in the outline. Like I wanted to talk about what was cooking like in college versus what does cooking look like now that I'm, like own a home and I'm married and all these things. So that was really helpful to get some feedback from that. And I really like using AI tools to get like feedback on things that I've already created versus to have it create things from scratch, because then I feel like there's less of a chance that the information is derivative or coming from something else. And I really get to flesh out my own ideas with like a second set of eyes. So once I have an outline that I'm happy with, then the next day, Tuesday, is recording day. Now, like I said, in my ideal world, Tuesday is the recording day. Today I'm recording on a Monday just because of some upcoming travel plans and things. Actually, by the time you guys are listening to this episode, I will have already gone to Boston with Andrew, who was running the Boston Marathon this year. So I'm recording a little ahead to make sure I can stay on track with my schedule. And I'm recording on a Monday because this is the day that Andrew's in the office this week. So this is not usually my typical recording day. Like I said, Mondays are usually outlining days. I'm still getting into my full form for the week. Maybe I don't have my makeup done. Maybe it's just like a hunched over my laptop and working kind of day. But we try to be flexible and we try to make sure that we can maintain consistency with the podcast so that there's not a Thursday that goes by where you don't get an episode. So hence I'm recording on Monday, but typically on Tuesday, what I will do is then batch record the 2 episodes that I outlined on Monday. And I am doing that today. I'm just doing it like one day scooched up. So I actually did my 2 outlines yesterday for last week's episode, how I learned how to not hate cooking, and this week's episode, celebrating 100 episodes. And this is the second episode I'm recording today. In an ideal world, I would love to get you guys like true timely content every week, but I also like the episodes to be a little bit evergreen so you can kind of jump in and listen at any time. But I also do love doing the little seasonal episodes that we do occasionally too. And I'll talk a little bit more about the cadence of episodes and some of the most popular episodes later today. Then typically Wednesday becomes my editing and scheduling day. So this is where I take the episode and I edit both a video and an audio version of it. So whichever you prefer to listen to. And I always say this, I've always really wanted to make sure the podcast also always had a video format. However, I myself do not consume video podcasts. Like, if there's an option for it to be audio, I am always going to choose that just because I love that I can take it on the go. I feel like it's so much easier for me to actually listen. And I feel like I just inhale audio podcasts. Like I truly listen to so many every single week. Anyway, so I edit the episode. I get the video uploaded on YouTube. I host my podcast for audio on Spotify, get the audio uploaded there. And then there's still all of the finishing touches. So I make sure that the show notes are ready to go. So if you scroll down and see a little description for this episode and maybe links to things that I've mentioned, that is all stuff that I have to put together and put in the place so that you can find things if I reference things, or if you're searching and somehow, like I said, you stumbled upon this as your first episode and maybe you were searching for 100 episodes of a podcast to hear about someone's experience being a podcaster for that many episodes. Because a lot of podcasts, actually, I have to look back because I think for the 50th podcast episode, I may have referenced this statistic, but something crazy, like only, I don't know, 20% of podcasts have more than 10 episodes published. I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and look on that. Or maybe if you guys want to listen to the 50 episode journey and hear how things have changed, I can link that episode in the show notes. You know what? I take that back. We did not do a 50th episode special. I did a 1 year of podcasting, what I've learned. And now this is almost 2 years later. So the podcast anniversary is actually going to be in May. But this is the 100th episode, and this felt very worth marking and celebrating. Okay, so then I have the episodes outlined, then recorded, then edited and scheduled. And then Thursday is the day that the episode comes out. And this is also the day that I start doing some marketing for the episode. So I like to share each episode on Threads. I also share 2 clips from each podcast episode on social media. So if you follow the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, at Create and Consume Pod, you will probably see content from the episode come out either like Thursday or Friday. And I also do a blog post for each episode. So it's a lot. Also, if you're interested in like visually seeing everything that I just described of how a podcast comes together in a given week for me, I did just do a behind the scenes vlog for my YouTube channel where I documented a week in my life as a podcaster. So if you actually want to see me outlining, if you want to see the behind the scenes of, the ring lights behind the camera right now and all of the things that are going on while recording, that is in one of my most recent YouTube videos. So I will link that in the show notes for you. Editing Austen will take a little note when I say stuff like that. Okay, like she said that she's going to link her vlog in the show notes. So make sure you go grab a link and put that in the show notes. And that way you'll be able to see all the things that I mention. And after publishing that, I did want to answer a couple of follow-up questions that I received from that vlog. So one of them was, how many hours do you spend on the podcast a week? And I would say 10 is really where I've noticed that I land. I feel like it could take, 2 hours to do the outlining on Monday, 2 hours to record on Tuesday, probably an hour and a half, but really more like 2 hours for the editing and scheduling on Wednesday. And then there's other random stuff like the time it takes me to get ready to film and record, the time it takes to upload or export, like while I'm waiting for things to do that. And then also when I'm giving feedback to a virtual assistant who typically helps me with scheduling out the clips for the podcast and reviewing the blog post that they drafted for the episode. So usually it's 10 hours a week on a recording week. So this is a recording week for me, but next week, because like I told you guys, I am filming 2 episodes in one day, breaking the fourth wall a little here. So I just like did one and then changed and came back and sat down. This is a filming week for me where the time is probably going to max out at around the 10 hours. For next week, all I'm really going to have to do is edit and upload the episode and then review the social clips. So this is one thing that does help me save a little bit of time. And the reason I do try to keep it to 10 hours is because the podcast is still kind of a side hustle for me. Like I don't view it that way. Like I take it seriously and I make sure that every week you guys get an episode, but it's a side hustle for me in the sense that like I really don't make money from the podcast. I am not monetizing through ads yet on YouTube or on Spotify. If anything, the money that I make from the podcast just comes from like affiliate links. If you guys, click on something in the description box, or if you watch a YouTube video or a blog post and you found it through the podcast, and I can make money from ad revenue over there. So that is really the only way that I'm monetizing the podcast right now. So as much as I would love to spend more time on it, I just can't justify spending more time than what I'm already doing on it. And then another question was like, how do you upload the episodes everywhere? Because you can listen to the audio version on a bunch of different platforms. There's also the video version. So like, how does that work? Essentially right now, the video version only goes on YouTube. You can also upload video episodes to Apple and Spotify. None of the podcasts that I listen to do that. And I don't really love the experience of video on Spotify or Apple, just because to me, those are for on the go podcast listening, That's just, I don't know. There's something in my head that like isn't catching up to. Obviously, I think it's great that we have the ability to add video on either platform, but for some reason in my head, video is for YouTube. So I upload the video just to YouTube, and then I upload the audio on Spotify for creators. So that's like the back end where I can actually upload the episode. That is where it's called the RSS feed is hosted. And basically, once I upload to Spotify, it gets distributed across all platforms. So you'll be able to listen to it on Apple. I know a lot of people, I can see in my analytics, about like a third of you guys do listen on Apple Podcasts. It also goes out to Amazon. I think it also goes out to like a couple of other smaller hosting sites too. So if you listen to the podcast somewhere other than Spotify or Apple, honestly, please do like reach out and let me know just so I can see what the podcast looks like on there, make sure everything looks good. So yeah, that is pretty much how that all works. When I look back on how the podcast has grown over the last 100 episodes, a couple of key things stand out. Number one is obviously the new setup, which we talked about already. Obviously, this little corner of the home office that I am so grateful to have for the podcast, where I can have the mic mounted here. I have my gorgeous, like I said, brown velvet chair from Wayfair. I can link this in the show notes too. It literally feels like being in a cool, loungy bar or something. I feel like this plus the little drink table is something that I would see at like the Maker Hotel cocktail lounge. And I also elevated my filming setup. So for a while, I was actually filming the podcast on my phone, which I do have to say, if you're just starting out, is such a great option. You can use the webcam feature like with your laptop. You could choose to use your phone as the webcam and connect it that way if you have an iPhone and a Mac. So that's what I used to do. I used to have the phone propped up just above my computer, and I would sit at my desk with my notes and I would talk to you guys that way. What I ended up doing is I'm finally taking advantage of the fact that my Sony ZV-E10 camera, which I'm obsessed with and I use for vlogging, has a feature where I can use it to live stream. So my camera right now is plugged in to my laptop, which is over on my desk, and I am live streaming and recording the podcast through Riverside. And the reason I like this live streaming process and using Riverside and the camera to do this is because I am able to stream the episode. It gets saved on Riverside, like on their cloud. And then when I download the file, it's a much more compressed version of it versus if I were filming in 4K for an hour and using that space, like eating up on my memory card and stuff. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, by the way, I'm very sorry. I feel like I just got super technical. But what I'm trying to say is this saves a lot of memory and storage. So I don't actually have to like eat up my memory card every time I record an episode. And it's just a really nice and easy way to have everything interconnected. And then similarly, my microphone, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening, you can just envision a microphone, is also plugged in to my laptop, and I'm able to select that as the audio source on Riverside. So everything is all connected, super easy, just plug straight into the computer. The podcast has also obviously grown in terms of listenership. Like I said, when I looked at the analytics and saw that it's been streamed in more than 60 countries, that's absolutely crazy to me. And, maybe it's only been streamed once in Uzbekistan. If you're listening in Uzbekistan right now, hello, please reach out to me. I would love to say thank you. But you never know. You just truly never know, like, who in the world you are able to reach. And I just find that so fascinating. And it's been really fun to check back each week and see, like, the average listens per episode just, like, has continued to go up over time. And that's something that I'm really, really grateful for. And I love being able to, or like the thought of being able to create a community or cultivate like a place that people like stopping by, on their Thursday for 45 minutes or however long the episode usually is, that the next week they're also like, oh, I really want to go back to where I was last Thursday. So I really like the idea of that and building not just an audience, but an engaged audience where you guys feel like you really want to keep coming back each week because you're enjoying the conversations and how they're structured, whatever it is that keeps you coming back each week. The podcast also has a different look from when it first launched. So originally the cover art for the podcast was Create and Consume, like the same logo and the same typeface that I still have now, but just like on a gradient background. Obviously, at the time, I didn't have really any idea what the podcast was going to look like. I didn't want to invest too much in it just yet, like in the very beginning. So I worked with what I had. I made a cover in Canva and I said, this is my podcast cover. And that was the cover, I think, for the first year before I did my rebrand shoot last year. And I was able to shoot in a studio space. I was also doing a rebrand for my website, austentosone.com, and then also obviously for the podcast cover art and just getting like some updated, video and photo that I could use across my platforms that was beautifully shot and professional. So Shelly, who is a photographer based in Hoboken, did all of the photography for that. I worked with a makeup artist named Serene, who was great. But again, I didn't let the fact that I didn't have like the perfect podcast cover prevent me from launching the podcast. It was just one of those things that I knew, like, okay, later on, once we have built a little momentum here, we can like upgrade that at a different time. And the podcast has also grown in the fact that I have hired help. Although I will say this is something that I am still kind of struggling with a little bit. I think I alluded to this maybe a couple of episodes back, but essentially, I was working with a virtual assistant all throughout 2025 who was wonderful, who just had to leave her role due to other commitments. She was really like fantastic. And even the way that she, exited and like told me she was quitting was like so professional, so thoughtful, really like went the extra mile to make sure that the transition was like seamless and easy. And then I ended up hiring someone in January that just like really wasn't working out. And then I ended up hiring someone in February who quit on me. So it's been kind of an interesting journey. It's definitely made me doubt a little bit, like if I'm a good boss, if I'm doing the right stuff, if I'm putting all the right things in place. And I have had the good fortune of having my friend Caitlin kind of step in and help me in the virtual assistant role, because she had a spot in her schedule open up. So she was able to come in and help me with a little bit of the work. And she was very reassuring. I asked her to like review all the materials and the way that I set people up and onboard and say, what do you think of this truly? Like, is there anything that's confusing about this or that you would change or that you don't understand? And she was very reassuring that I gave her everything she needed to, complete the work like in a timely fashion, providing like video tutorials of how to do things like select the clips for the episode, do an example of creating the blog post, which, like I said, there's a blog post for every single episode. So I'm very grateful that she has jumped in with me. I do plan to, try to find someone again soon. It's just now that I've gone through the hiring process, like twice in the last few months, it's not been something that I've been like ready and eager to jump back into and put on my calendar again. But I do feel like the right person for the job is out there. Okay, let's get into one of the parts that I've been most excited to talk about, which is some episode spotlights. And because there is, I think, kind of a different audience on both like the audio platforms and then also the YouTube channel for the podcast, I did go in and pull the top 5 episodes from both. Okay, so presenting, drumroll, the top 5 episodes of Create and Consume on Spotify. Starting with episode number 5, which actually I was blown away by because I just published this episode just a few weeks ago. So that means that it already has climbed to number 5 overall out of 100 episodes. And that is the Spring Fashion Guide, episode 95. The 4th most listened to episode was the Social Media Updates, What's Actually Working Online in 2026 episode from the beginning of this year. And that was episode 87. So another recent one. Number 3 overall is actually a big throwback all the way back to the beginning. So episode 1, Why I'm Starting a Podcast, is my 3rd most listened to episode on Spotify. Makes sense, right? Someone discovers a new podcast, maybe they go straight to the beginning. And if you wanted to hear more about the show, whether or not you might like it, get a vibe for it, it's sometimes a good idea to go all the way back to episode 1. My 2nd most popular episode on Spotify, again, I was kind of surprised by this, was my Sephora sale shopping guide. That was episode 76. And I honestly recorded that episode just because I was shopping the sale. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I should just do an episode about the Sephora sale. So we should talk about it. And that is so crazy that it's the number 2 episode overall. And I'm basically just talking about shopping and beauty, which, as you guys know, I could talk about all day. So that was really fun to see. And then the number 1 episode on Spotify by a landslide, by the way, is Met Gala History, Highlights, and Theme, which was episode 50. So there you go. Episode 50 was about the Met Gala. This was from the 2025 Met Gala, and I definitely felt like searches for it picked up as we got a little closer to the event. I have already done the episode about what we know about the Met Gala so far for 2026, so that is live now. I am planning to do a recap of the 2026 Met Gala too. That episode will come out on May 7th, so right after the Met Gala. And why do I think some of these episodes have done well? I do think that there's a lot of searchable topics in here, like spring fashion guide, Sephora sale, Met Gala. Obviously, episode 1 is going to be popular. And I just think that, these evergreen topics too, like why I'm starting a podcast, social media, all of those things. And I'll be curious to see like if the Sephora sale episode spikes, every April and October. Like the Sephora sale is actually going on right now. I published this episode in the fall, but I'm curious if anyone's listening to it in the spring to hear recommendations. And similar to the Met Gala episode, I'm curious to see like if each year that episode gets listened to over and over again, even though I obviously will try to like, do an episode for 2026, the Met Gala, and so on and so forth until people are sick of me talking about it. Now, funny enough, there was zero overlap in the top 5 episodes over on YouTube. Coming in at number 5 was The Allure of Reality Dating TV Shows. That was episode 65, and that was like a little deep dive that I did talking about The Bachelor, Love is Blind, Love Island, and how and why people get sucked into them, myself included. Coming in at number 4 was episode 82, which was all about how I became a morning person. So I feel like that one kind of spiked towards the top of the year. People have new goals, new ambitions, like, oh, I really want to start waking up earlier this year. I really want to like do more with my day, that kind of thing. So I wonder if that was associated with some like New Year reset episodes and that kind of energy, because I feel like that was when the views for that one were spiking. Okay, so number 1 on Spotify was the 2025 Met Gala episode. Number 3 on YouTube was my 2026 Met Gala episode, which was just published a couple of weeks ago. So that was episode 96, What to Know About the 2026 Met Gala. I do think I had a good thumbnail for that one because it was like what we know so far from Beyonce to Bezos. And I feel like that already has some keywords that get people to go like, what? Did you say Beyonce? Like, and also, what about Jeff Bezos? So if you want to hear more, you can go listen to that episode. Okay, and similarly, I was really surprised by what came in at number 2 because I literally just did this episode like 2 weeks ago. Coming in at number 2 was 5 years as a full-time content creator, episode 98. I was so floored to see this doing well on YouTube because literally like I just recorded this one, so that's amazing. And then my number 1 episode on YouTube, again, by a landslide, is the 31 Taylor Swift songs that belong on other albums. That was episode 89. I'm really excited that these top 4 are all like recent episodes. I feel like that means that I'm really starting to find my audience on YouTube, that I'm connecting on some topics and encouraging people to click through. I feel like I just have been better about really stating my opinion in the titles and thumbnails and giving people a true sense of like what they can expect if they're going to click on the episode. I also think that switching the thumbnails to where now you can very clearly see me for the thumbnail sitting here with a microphone, like that already implies that this is a podcast style YouTube video and that we're going to be sitting and talking in this video versus maybe seeing a topic like, I'm making this up, but I'm just picking one that was popular on Spotify, but not popular on YouTube, like the Sephora sale shopping guide. Maybe if you saw that on YouTube, you would click on that expecting it to be a tutorial or a shopping vlog or something where I'm like holding up products and showing you what they do. And I feel like in the podcast format, when you see the thumbnail of someone sitting at a microphone, you already know what to expect going into it. And when did I actually switch away from the other covers? I think it must have been once I actually got my new setup, like this chair and everything. Interesting. Okay, so the first episode I did that for was the 31 Taylor Swift songs that belong on other albums. So I'm inclined to say that this new thumbnail style is working well for me on YouTube. And while I was doing a little deep dive into the analytics, I also selected 5 episodes that I think are underrated. Maybe you weren't listening to the podcast at the time. Maybe you saw them and didn't totally understand what they were about, but that I actually do really think are worth a listen that I'm proud of. So if you're a newer listener and you need something on deck for the next time you go on a walk or for your drive home or whatever it is, may I suggest episode 14, my ideal solo weekend itinerary. This is where I talk about exactly what I do when I have a weekend all to myself. And this involves exploring my neighborhood and it involves spending time by myself. And I really feel like this is something that everyone can grab onto and lean into whenever they find themselves with a solo weekend. Maybe every weekend in your life is a solo weekend, or maybe you finally have a day off. You've hired a babysitter and you're at a hotel and you're just chilling out alone. And I really think that this episode helps you appreciate, your own company and spending time with yourself. And I really enjoyed filming that one. I also recommend episode 13, which is called Getting Out of a Style Rut. And honestly, I feel like I might even give a listen to this one right now. The actual reason I'm in a style rut is because our closet's a mess. And this is something that I do need to figure out. I do need to plan a solution for. I do also want to film a vlog of transforming the closet. So I just haven't gotten to it for that reason. But I do feel like when you're in a style rut, first, it's so important to see and understand what's in your own closet. And in that episode, I share that, and I share even more tips for figuring out just how to fall back in love with getting dressed, and even talking about coming out of a totally different time period, or maybe you have a new job now, or maybe you just want to refresh your closet. Whatever the case is, hopefully that episode will help get you out of a little fashion funk if you find yourself in it. Okay, I also really liked episode 22, How to Know When to Pivot. I had a pretty big pivot in my business that I've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast on my YouTube channel in 2024. And I really think that became such a snowball effect for a lot of other areas of my business and also my life in general. And I think that anyone who is maybe feeling a little stuck or uninspired could probably benefit from listening to that episode and hearing more about the messy process of someone who went through a pivot and came out on the other side and was still okay, this isn't quite how it used to be, kind of still need to shake some things out and get some things sorted, but how much of a relief it is to just make a move at all versus stay stuck and stay where you are and feel like you're trapped in whatever situation it is that you're not happy with. Okay, another episode that I think is underrated on the podcast is the retail job that launched my fashion career. That's episode 39. I feel like that episode is just kind of a different way to approach things. And, I in college did a lot of relevant internships in the fashion industry. I was really sure that that was the industry that I wanted to work in. But if I didn't have access to those internships, if I wasn't living in New York, I think I would have still gone and gotten a retail job because I learned so much about fashion that way. And I think that's just proof that if there's an industry you want to get your feet into, or there's something you want to try, it doesn't always have to be oh, great, I got this internship and then I got hired at the company. You could still learn a lot from doing something that maybe on paper doesn't seem as connected, but can still teach you so much. I learned about styling, I learned about how much product we were selling, I learned about which items we were pushing the most. I started to I see all of that now still to this day when I go shopping in person. I think about the window displays, I think about where things are laid out, I think about how certain pieces are grouped near each other that can help you say oh, this is a great outfit because I could wear this skirt with this top. It really is fascinating, the psychology behind retail. So anyway, if you're interested in listening to that episode, that is episode 39. Okay, and another one that I feel like we all kind of need from time to time is How to Actually Protect Your Peace. That is episode 72. And every once in a while, I do need to go back and listen to what I said in this episode, because I feel like, especially being self-employed, it's been really helpful for me to set boundaries with putting my phone on do not disturb throughout the day. Just because I'm around doesn't mean I'm always available. Really trying to be cognizant of my energy, giving energy towards things that feel really fulfilling and that make sense to put energy towards, and not wasting precious energy on things that I have no control over. And also to reframe how we think about boundaries, because I had always thought boundaries were very restrictive, but in reality, I've found boundaries to be really freeing and really helpful. So yeah, those are a couple of episodes that if you are looking for something else to listen to or watch after this, maybe head back and check them out. I think, some of them were early into the show, within the first 20 episodes. Maybe some of the titles are vague, How to Actually Protect Your Peace. Maybe you looked at that and said, I'm not totally sure what that's about. I always welcome feedback too. If you're oh my gosh, this episode was so great, but I never would have listened to it based on the title, tell me, please. I'm always open to hearing what you guys think. And, my hope for this show is that you enjoy it so much and you're always like looking forward to it that you're willing to tune in kind of no matter what the topic is. I always try to like bring it all back to we're all alive in the era of digital content and these are things that we deal with in our everyday life. And I hope to do it in like a fun and chatty, relatable way. And that's how I feel about a lot of the podcasts that I listen to as well. Like the Bad on Paper podcast, I feel like they do a variety of like author interviews, they do silly chatty episodes, they do more reflective career episodes. I'm like, I'll listen no matter what they're talking about just because I really enjoy the host's banter and I'm here for whatever they really want to say, also podcasts like Game of Roses. Like, if anything, I have started watching other reality franchises because I wanted to listen to their podcasts talking about those franchises. A podcast like Dear Shandy has a couple of different formats. They do Q&As, they do recaps, they do expert topics. Like, I really have gone back and tried to listen to as many of the different episode formats as possible just because I always am wanting to hang out with the hosts regardless of what exactly it is. And another key thing for all of those shows, and what I hope is true for my show, is maybe that you just like learn something or you hear one thing that makes you think slightly differently that you can carry into your life or into your day, whatever the case is. And to wrap up, I thought it would be fun to do a little segment talking about the future. Ooh, this is me doing some finger wiggling if you're watching on YouTube, seeing into the future. Like, that's so Raven style. So, like, what is my vision for the next 100 episodes of the podcast? Because I love the podcast. I have no signs of stopping. This is something that I very much want to continue to invest time into. Honestly, truthfully, my vision for the next 100 episodes is to keep it simple, to stay consistent, and avoid burnout. Keep showing up every Thursday. I do have 1,000,001 ideas for the podcast, but I am very aware of my bandwidth and I don't want to ever overpromise and underdeliver. I only ever really want to do the opposite. So I will be here every Thursday to have conversations with you guys about being alive in a world of social media scrolling, of digital content, of new news breaking every 5 seconds seemingly, and to navigate it all together through some thoughtful episodes. I also want to make sure I'm continuing to rotate through topics. And I mean, just scrolling back through the most popular episodes, a lot of the topics you guys seem interested in are fashion, beauty, social media and content creation, pop culture. And I love all of those things and I want to continue to talk about them. And I think I mentioned this a couple of episodes back, but given the popularity of episodes like the Sephora shopping guide and the spring fashion guide, also my fall fashion guide was a top 10 episode. I really want to make that kind of like a seasonal series. So I think there are going to be 4 episodes a year, 2 that are focused on beauty. So to do like a winter beauty favorites and a summer beauty favorites, and then for fashion to do a spring fashion guide and a fall fashion guide. I want those to be repeated episodes that come up like once a season, just because that again helps me eliminate decisions about the podcast so that I know, okay, sometime during the summer, we're going to do a summer beauty episode. And it also gives you guys some repeatedness. Like, I really do like the variety of the podcast, but it does give you guys some kind of core thing that is going to happen each season for you to look forward to. So I do believe that that is the plan going forward, to do those 4 episodes. So that'll be like 4 out of the 52 a year that are decided already. I do think guest episodes are still potentially on the table for this year. I honestly still just feel like I want them to be really worthwhile for both me and the guest, which I think would involve renting out a podcast studio and like making a whole thing of it. That obviously costs money. I would just want to look into what my options are there and figure out how worth it would be and how often I would have guests on. But yeah, definitely still something that I'm thinking about. And then one other idea that I wrote down with a question mark after it, mind you, was maybe a mini series that would allow me to take some time off over the summer, question mark. So I don't really know what exactly that would be yet. I feel like it could be fun to do like a little social media deep dive series. And what I mean by me take time off is like I would basically batch record maybe 4 episodes, call it, and then just have them scheduled out so I can actually, quote unquote, take a break from the podcast over the summer. So I might skip like the create and consume segments for those episodes just because obviously I wouldn't necessarily have something for each week that things are actually live and happening, but maybe I could do like a content creation 101 series or a travel series or neighborhood guides or something like that. I don't know. If you guys have any ideas or if there's anything in particular you would want to hear that you're like, oh, Austen could easily knock out 4 episodes on this topic, please let me know. That was just a thought I had. Again, like my goal with the podcast is to stay consistent, like get you guys an episode every week. That is so important to me just because I know how important it is to me for podcasts I listen to. And I also just always want to be in the rhythm of creating, but I want to make sure that I'm giving myself time to come up with new ideas, obviously not burn out, and keep things interesting over here. So that's our 100th episode. I still can't wrap my mind around it. So again, truly, thank you so much for listening, especially if you've made it all the way to the end of this episode. It really means a lot to me. And I'm just so happy to be here. I love Create and Consume. I love this podcast. I love this community. And I love this medium of content creation, which is, it's so funny to me that, over a decade into my journey as a content creator, I'm still discovering new mediums of content, new ways to connect with people, and new fun side quests and brands to build in addition to everything I've built so far. So really, thank you again for everything. Happy 100 episodes, Create and Consume, and I will talk to you guys all again next week.